about water? Am I in the right place? Water. Water's the whole reason me and the missus come here to Ottawa County from Pennsylvania. That was way back in '38. Now I can see some of you remember 1938. But this was 100 years before that. This was 1838. Me and the missus, we was farming on a hillside in Pennsylvania. Now the trouble with the hillside in Pennsylvania is if the good Lord decides to hold back on water, first the cistern goes dry, and then the well goes dry, and then the animals go thirsty, and then the crops go dry. And then if the good Lord decides to give you more water than you can handle when you're up on a hillside, water always tries to go down the hill just as fast as it can go. It can wash you out. Well, that's what happened to us back in the summer of 1837. First we had a drought, and then we had a flood. First everything dried up, and then it rained for 3 days and water just washed us out. So in the fall of '37, I turned to the missus and I says, Irene, why don't we go out to Ohio? Well, Irene, she thought about that, and she thought about that, and she thought about that. You know how women do, especially when a man tries to do something. She thought about that some more. And I says, Irene, how about we go to Ohio? And she said, what's the water like out in Ohio? I said, I suppose it's the same as it is here. Except that out there, along that big lake, the land is flat. There's no hills. You don't have to worry about it drying up the cistern and running downhill in a flood. Let's go. She thought about it some more, and finally she says, Daniel, you know I'll go where you go, as long as all the kids go and the whole family goes with us. So that's what we did. The winter of January 1938, we butchered the last hog. We gathered up a few chickens, some rabbits, 1 goose, our family dog, 2 oxen, Billy and Buck, and we hooked them up to the ox cart. And we come across 400 miles of Appalachian Mountains to Ohio. Now you might be saying, you come across the Appalachian Mountains in the middle of the winter? We were farmers. Farmers know in the summer is growing season. You don't do something like that in the summer, so we traveled in the winter. And you might be saying, in the winter? What about all that frozen ice and snow? Well, when we had to cross the Susquehanna, the Allegheny, the Monongahela, the Cuyahoga, the Huron, and when all of them were locked up in ice, it's a lot easier to cross them than when they're running wild willy-nilly. So we come across in January. So we put our 6 kids, and our granddaughter May was an infant. Our daughter Elizabeth and my wife Irene sat on the top of everything we owned on the ox cart, and Elizabeth held the infant. And you might be saying, you come across in the middle of winter with an infant? Well, an infant don't know whether it's by the fire or out on the trail. So here we come. Ohio, here we come. So we come, and we finally made it out here in February, and all that frozen water let us cross with no problem. We got here, and the Sandusky Bay was frozen, and so we walked across it to come over here to where we are now. We heard about some place called Toussaint, so we go up to this Toussaint area. Now on the map, this Toussaint area shows land with some streams and then the lake. But what really happens there, when we got to actually see it, we figured the good Lord, when he was designing that place, he must have hurried on to do something else, because he forgot to decide whether it was the land or the lake. It was wet. Now, when we first got there, everything was frozen. So we found ourselves a bark hut that some other people had abandoned and given back to the land speculators. We got it cheap, moved in and fixed up the bark hut, and waited for winter to turn into spring when we could put plow to the ground. Well, when spring came, there wasn't no putting plow to the ground. The first thing that happened, everything melted and copperheads came up into our cabin looking for a place to get out of the water. So Irene says, this ain't Pennsylvania. She says, maybe we should go turn around, go back. And I said, no, we're gonna stay here, Irene. We're gonna figure out what all these other people do. How do they get by? So after she killed the copperheads, I look out the door and the oxen are in mud up to their bellies. The ox cart is buried up to its hub. So I go to some of the neighbors around here and say, how do you folks even live in this place? Well, they told me about hunting and trapping and fishing, and I learned all about how to do those things from my neighbors. And we only did our farming in the short growing season when some of the mud dried out in July and August, if it did dry out. So we ended up living there and learning how to live with water. And as our kids grew and had more kids, and we all learned how to live in that land, first thing you know, they name it Ottawa County. And we're thinking, Ottawa County. Ottawa means people who trade. Well, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't trade this piece of land or this area for any other place on earth. Well, I gotta go check my traps. Nice talking to you.